Today I'm going to talk about how to work with SPSS. Okay, we all know that SPSS is a statistical program that is very popular for statistical analysis in social sciences. So I'll first begin with the history of SPSS, but before that, let me tell you a story about SPSS. Okay, we know that SPSS is a program that has been used for the past several decades, and originally SPSS stands for Statistical Package for Social Sciences, okay, because that's the original purpose of this program. And then later, the acronym stays the same, but the meaning of this acronym has been changed to Statistical Product and Service Solutions. And then in 2009, when IBM purchased the SPSS, they decided to change the name of SPSS to PASW, which stands for Predictive Analytics Software. Okay. So because people didn't like the name of PASW and it is not popular, so later IBM SPSS decided to change the name back to IBM SPSS Statistics. So in the publications, whenever you see the term SPSS, it may stand for the original program SPSS, may stand for the later version of PASW, or it may stand for the IBM SPSS Statistics. But most of the people will just use SPSS instead of the full name IBM SPSS Statistics, just for the purpose of being easier and consistent with the earlier versions. So the most recent version of SPSS is the version 21, and I'm currently using version 20 because that's the version that is available to faculty and students on campus. Next, I have the release history of this program, and I copied this from the IBM SPSS website, so this is not mine. But you can see that this is already the second version of SPSS, which was released in 1983. Okay, the very first version was released in 1970s, but then starting in 1983, this program becomes very, very popular. Okay, version 20, that is the one I'm currently using, but version 21 is the most recent version that was released last August. I have not had a chance to try version 21 yet. But again, from the IBM SPSS website, I've learned that there are all those new features about this version 20. And among all those features, I especially like the one that says SPSS can export the output to Excel 2007 and 2010, because in the past, you remember, like whenever you copy the SPSS output tables, it's not convenient. Sometimes you may see errors, sometimes the format does not match with your Word file, but now there is a new feature that SPSS can export the output to Excel files. Okay, but there are also other nice features in this new version, so if you are going to try this new version, maybe you can try those new features. Well, for today's presentation, I'm going to talk about several very basic aspects of SPSS. I'm going to talk about how to begin an SPSS session, right? Because that's the computer program, have to begin how to open this program. I'm going to talk about how to enter data in SPSS. I'm going to talk about how to define variables, right? Variables and the data are the main components of a SPSS dataset. I'm going to talk about how to create new variables based on existing ones. I'm also going to talk about the types of SPSS files and also other statistical programs. Okay. So when you have your laptop or your desktop, and when you decide to use SPSS, the first step is to open the program, right? If the program is available on your laptop or on your desktop, you have to open the program. So I'm only going to show you how to open the program for the Windows operating system. Okay. So you can either go to on your laptop or your desktop, you can go to Start. That's the Windows icon if you are using the Windows operating system. Go to Start, All Programs, IBM SPSS Statistics, and then go to IBM SPSS Statistics 20 because that's the version I'm using on my laptop. Or you can use the IBM SPSS shortcut on your desktop, right? If you have a desktop folder on your laptop, you can always try to use the shortcut by clicking on this icon, just like any other computer programs, right? You can open these programs by going to the All Programs and try to locate the programs from the list, or you can click on the shortcut on the desktop. Okay. So after you have opened the SPSS program, you will see a window popping up, right? You will see a window popping up. And at this point, you can either open an existing data source. For example, if you already have a SPSS data set you have been working on, you can try to open the SPSS data set from here. Or you can type in your data. So if you choose the second option, type in data, you can start typing your data after you clicked on OK. But I always click on Cancel because I like to see a blank SPSS data editor. Okay, I almost always click on Cancel. Okay. And then after I have clicked on Cancel, I have a new window. Okay. So this is the major SPSS data editor window, and this is the window that most of the time people are working with. Okay. So this is the data editor window. And if you would like to type your data, you can start typing your values just like you would type in an Excel file, right? So if you have 10 participants, you can start typing the values for those 10 participants on those different variables in those different columns. Okay. So we're now in the data view. Okay, so data view is like an Excel spreadsheet. You can just begin type your data. So we're now in the data view. If you pay attention to the other features on this window, you'll notice there is also a toolbar, right? Just like if you're working with your Microsoft Word, you have a toolbar with all those different icons that can allow you to open a particular file, save, print, and then all the other functions. Okay, so this is the SPSS toolbar. There is also an SPSS menu bar. Okay, again similar to the Microsoft Word program. Right, there is a toolbar that allows you to do the regular commands for SPSS. For example, under the menu file, you can open file, right? You can either open your file by using the first icon here, or you can open your file by clicking on the file from the menu bar. There are also other options such as edit, view, data, and all the other menus are for statistical analysis. Actually, in SPSS, most of the time people are focused on using those additional menus to perform SPSS functions. Okay, so toolbar and menu bar, those are often used functions when people run statistical analysis. Okay, so now we're in the data view, right? You can enter your data. You have the toolbar, you have the menu bar. We also have a variable view. Okay, so in the same place, if you switch from the data view to the variable view, okay, although this may seem like the previous data view, but this view is different because this allows you to enter your variables and the characteristics about your variables. Earlier in the data view, that's where you enter your data. Like if you have 10 participants, you can enter the data for the 10 participants. But now this is where you have to define your variables. If you have 5 variables, this is where you are going to define your variable names. Right? First cell is the variable name, and then you can define your variable type, right? Whether the variable is a numerical variable. Most of the time people like to keep the variables as numerical variables because you're going to calculate statistics such as means and correlations. So we like to deal with numerical variables. But in SPSS you can also enter string variables. For example, if you are going to enter school names, you can enter the full school names. So you can use string variables instead of numerical variables to specify school names. Okay. You can also specify the maximum number of digits or letters you can enter in cells in the data view for this variable. So in other words, if you have a variable which is called school name, you want to enter the full school name, you can cap how many letters you can enter, right? So if the longest school name has 20 characters, you may want to specify the width for that variable so that you can enter all those 20 characters. So width gives you the maximum number of digits or letters you can use for this particular variable. There is also the column called decimals. This is where you can specify how many decimal places that you want SPSS to show. Okay. This does not mean that you are rounding your numbers. This just means that how many decimal places you want SPSS to show. So this will not round your values. This is just for the purpose of showing the numbers. Okay. You can also specify the label of the variable. So for example, if you give a questionnaire and in your if you give a questionnaire, your variable names may be item 1, item 2, item 3, and item 10, but those generic names do not have any meanings if you just look at those variable names. So sometimes you may want to add variable labels. For example, the first item may be student's gender. Right? You may say item 1 and then you add a variable name, you add a variable label, gender as the label for the first variable name. Right? Item 1 is the variable name and the gender is the variable label. Or in other cases, you have different statements that you ask your participants whether they agree or disagree with those statements. You can add those actual statements as variable labels. Okay. So you may use item 10 as the variable name, but the variable label may be I like reading, I like reading. Right. You can also specify the value labels here. So for example, you have a variable called student's sex, and then in your data you may use zeros for males and ones for females. So in your data view you have zeros and ones, but how do you know whether zeros represent males and ones represent females? You can add value labels. Okay. So the variable name is sex, and the variable values are zeros and ones, and the value labels are males for zeros and females for ones. Okay, we can also specify the value labels here. Okay. So under variable view, you can specify different properties about the variables, and in the data view, you can specify the actual data values for those variables. So if we are going to compare the variable view with the data view, okay, in the variable view, each row represents a different variable. right? So in this example, I have 5 different variables. The first variable is called child. So this is just the child ID, the first, the second, third, and the fourth child. And then the second variable is weight, and third variable is height, and then I have age and age 2. So this is where I specify my variables in the variable view. In the data view, however, each row represents a different participant. Therefore, the first child has the first row, and each column represents a different variable. So for the first child, the first value on the first variable is 1, because this is the first child. This person has a weight of 64 pounds. So each row represents a participant, and each column represents a variable. Okay. So if you decide to enter your data and enter your variable names from scratch, that's what we can do. You just enter your variables as if you are in the spreadsheet, and you can specify your variable properties by switching between the data view and the variable view. What if we want to create a new variable based on the existing variables, right? Because a lot of times we're going to derive new variables based on the existing variables. So you may not want to do all your calculations outside of SPSS because that may be tedious. So luckily, SPSS has this function that allows you to compute new variables based on existing ones. For example, based on this data set, I would like to calculate the variable BMI, body mass index, right? So I have the information on those children's weight, I have the information on those children's height, and I want to create a new variable because BMI is based on both variables. How can we create this new variable? Well, first we have to know the function, right? So BMI is a function of weight and height. So in this equation, weight is measured in terms of pounds, and height is measured in terms of inches. I want to create this new variable. And that's very easy in SPSS. As long as you know the function, it's very easy to create new variables. So in SPSS, we can just go to the transform. This is the menu. From the menu bar, go to transform, and then click on compute variable. Right. So after you click on compute variable, you are going to have a new window. Okay. In this new window, we can specify the new variable name. This time we have BMI as the new variable name. And you can, in the box called numerical expression, you can write down the expression or the function for creating this new variable. So for this BMI variable, I have written down the numerical expression as weight divided by height times height, and then times 703, because that's the function. That's the numerical function. So we know how to create a new variable based on the existing ones. And then you may ask, how do I know all those different functions, right? What if I would like to use a square root? What if I want to use a log transformation? Or what if I'm going to use a sine function? This list gives you all the different functions that you can use for creating new variables. Okay. So I just type in the numerical expression for BMI because I know how to divide and how to get the square of a variable. But if you are not familiar with all the other different functions, you can go to the function groups And if you click on each of those categories, you're going to have a list of functions that can be used. Okay. So this is how we can create a new variable based on existing ones. For this example, I'll just click on OK because I already have my numerical expression and I already have my new variable name. If I click on OK, this will bring me back to the data editor window, data view in the data editor window. So you will notice that there is a new column called BMI. We know that in the data view, each column represents a variable, right? So now I have a new column and have a new variable. Each case has a new value on this new variable. So the first child has a BMI of 13.85. So creating new variables in SPSS are very easy as long as you know the functions that links the new variable with the existing variables. So if you are going to start with an SPSS data set, if you are going to create new variables, we have done that. But sometimes you have a data set that are in other formats, right? And this is very common. Maybe you are collaborating with other people on projects and the other person is more familiar with Excel, or the other person is more familiar with text file. So those data may be in the Excel spreadsheet, or sometimes the data may be in the databases. So is there an easy way to create SPSS datasets based on other types of data files? And fortunately, SPSS can import data from other formats. For example, SPSS can read data from spreadsheets, right? So if you have a spreadsheet in the Excel file, we can create an SPSS dataset based on the Excel spreadsheet. So in the Excel spreadsheet, a lot of times the first row is the column headings, right? So instead of just having data in the Excel spreadsheet, you also have information about the variables. So SPSS also allows you to read the column headings as the variable names. In other words, you do not have to specify the variable names after you have imported the data from those spreadsheets. Of course, if there is no column headings in your Excel file, you can also specify that there is no column headings. And then in Excel, the names will be generic names like variable 1, variable 2, variable 3. We can also read data from a database. For example, we can read from an Access database. Okay, Access is a program that is a program that allows you to create relational data sets. So, for example, you may have a data set for teachers, you may have a data set for students, and then there is a data set that tells you about the relationships between teachers and students, like which teacher teaches which student. So you can read data from a database. Very neat, right? We can also read data from a text file. Okay. So the reason that sometimes people want to use a text file to store data is because text file is very compact, right? If you have a very large data set, using a text file can save a lot of computer space. And also text file is very easy to transfer because a lot of people have the notepad to read the text file. A lot of people have Microsoft Word to read text file, but not everybody has an SPSS program on their computer. So we can read data from the text file, and we can read the text file with variables that are separated by delimiters, right? So in your text file, the different variables may be separated by tabs, or they may be separated by other symbols such as a colon or comma or any other type of separators. So if that's the case, we can read the data by using the variable delimiters, or other times we may have a text file that the first several digits represents the first variable, and then the next several digits represents another variable. We call that a fixed width file. So maybe the first 5 columns in your text file represents the student ID, and then the next column represents student sex, and the next 3 digits represents students' MAP scores. So SPSS can also read a text file with a fixed width variables. So in other words, SPSS is quite clever in terms of reading variables from the other formats. And sometimes we have multiple SPSS data sets, right? So we may have a data set that for students from one classroom, and we may have a similar data set, but the participants are students from a different classroom. So we may want to merge those 2 SPSS data sets so that we have a complete data set with students from both classrooms. Or other times, we may have a data set about students' demographic information in one data set, and we have another data set with the same students' information, but the information is about students' test scores. So we can merge different data sets. In the first scenario, we're trying to add cases because we're trying to add additional participants. We're trying to merge data sets that for different participants but with the same variables. And in the second scenario, we're trying to add additional variables for the same participants. We're trying to merge information about the students' demographics and the information about the students' test scores. So SPSS allows us to merge multiple SPSS data sets so that we can create a complete SPSS data set. So SPSS is quite flexible in terms of handling data, right? The data management part, SPSS is quite clever. You can create your data set from scratch. You can create your data set from existing files. You can specify your variable names. You can play with your variables to get new variables. You can change the display of the variables in terms of how many decimal places you want to show, in terms of the width of those columns in the data editor. So that's all about the SPSS data set, right? Just like in the spreadsheet, you have the data. So SPSS data files have the same extension .sav. Just like in Excel, you have the extension .xls or .xlsx for later versions of Excel. In SPSS, data files have the extension .sav. Whenever you see a file with the extension .sav, this is a SPSS data set. Unlike Excel, you only have one type of data files with the same extension. SPSS also have other types of files. For example, SPSS has an output file with the extension .spv. So I'll show you one example of the output file. So this is based on the example after I've run some calculations, after I've run some statistical analysis, this is what I have. This is the SPSS output file that I can read the results of the statistical analysis. So SPSS output files have the extension .spv. SPSS also has the syntax files with the extension .sps. So the reason sometimes you want to use the syntax files is because you may have run some statistical analysis and you want to maybe give your colleagues a copy of the statistical analysis you have performed. However, you do not want to have the whole output because the whole output may be fairly long. One way is you can send the syntax file to your colleagues so that they can always replicate what you have done. So I will give you one example of the syntax file. You see different colors represents different commands. And of course, you can, if you are familiar with SPSS syntax, you can always write the syntax. You can always program about what statistical analysis you want SPSS to do. So syntax is more flexible, and the syntax files have the extension .sps. So the three types of SPSS files, the SPSS dataset with the extension .sav, the SPSS output files with the extension .spv, and the SPSS syntax files with the extension .sps. Okay. So SPSS is quite useful. And luckily, we have different ways to access SPSS on campus. Okay. So as far as I know, all the computer labs on campus have SPSS installed. So this is available to, if you are going to, if you are on campus, if you decide to use SPSS, you can go to a computer lab and use SPSS from there. You can also buy a copy for $65 from the MU IT department. Okay. This is not something that has been there for a long time. This was new only from a couple of years ago. In the past, if students couldn't buy a copy of SPSS with this reduced cost, but now students can buy a copy from MU Department of IT. Or you don't have to pay for SPSS as long as you are a student, because you can also use the SPSS program from software anywhere, right? So, for example, if you don't have a SPSS on your laptop and if you're on campus, you can use a software anywhere to access SPSS remotely. If you are off campus, if you want to use this software anywhere, you may also have to use the VPN network before you can use this software anywhere. So this allows you to use SPSS even no SPSS is installed on your laptop or on your computer at home. There are also training workshops on campus for SPSS, and here I gave you the website. The training workshops are free for all the students and the faculty of MU, and I've heard very good things about those training workshops. So if you want to sharpen your SPSS skills, you can register for those SPSS training workshops, and those training workshops usually cost thousands of dollars if you are going to have similar trainings outside of MU. So I do recommend you to consider those training workshops, consider using those resources for SPSS. So that's all about SPSS, right? enter the data, how to get data sets. We didn't talk about how to run statistical analysis because that's the purpose of taking statistical courses, right? So SPSS is not only about handling data. SPSS is more about doing all those type of statistical analysis. Okay, I only covered basics about how to get data, how to get variables, but the major components of SPSS is by using the manuals or syntax to run statistical analysis. There are also other statistical packages that you may be interested in, and then you may wonder how they are different from SPSS. So I just listed several very popular statistical packages, and I'll give you a flavor about those packages. The first package is MATLAB. So MATLAB is a statistical program, and a lot of people in engineering uses MATLAB. This is because it's quite fast in terms of computations. So if you have a lot of computations to be done, MATLAB is a lot faster than SPSS because they have the built-in functions. Okay, those functions are built in so that it's easier to conduct the computations. And also MATLAB is quite good in terms of data visualization. Okay, SPSS has some graphical features, but those graphs are not really of high quality. So MATLAB is, if you want to do data visualizations, SPSS has a lot of options for you to choose. Another statistical package is R. R is getting quite popular. Okay, it's getting very popular because you may have heard a lot of people talking about using R in statistics and even in College of Education. And one reason may be R is free, right? Whenever a statistical package is free, is good news, right? So R is a syntax-based freeware package. Users create statistical procedures, right? Unlike SPSS, you have to use those procedures that the SPSS company creates. But in R, everybody can create statistical procedures. So if you have a particular need to conduct any analysis or do any computations, you can create a statistical procedure using R. So because everybody can create a statistical procedures, so if you are using another person's statistical procedure, you may not be able to find out what was going on when the person created those procedures. So there may be some errors that go undetected. And another statistical package is SAS. The SAS company is a huge company, and is quite influential in the industry. And it is a lingua franca in industry because a lot of companies uses SAS as the major platform for their analysis and data management. However, SAS is very, very expensive. It's very, very expensive. I was talking about thousands of dollars for one copy, and maybe tens of thousands of dollars for the whole company, and maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars for the whole company to use SAS. And universities usually have a site license that can be renewed every year. So on this campus, I know that I can pay $65 to use SAS for 1 year, and then every year I just pay another $65 to have a new version of SAS. So SAS is quite powerful, but if you're going to purchase a SAS of your own, and if you are not affiliated with a university, it may be very costly. And another program is Stata. Okay. Again, Stata is getting quite popular in the past 5 or 6 years or so. It has been there for a while, but it's just getting more popular in the past several years, and is beginning to get more popular among universities. For example, our university have purchased a site license of Stata. So Stata is also has syntaxes. You can write a syntax for Stata, and the Stata also has a menu bar so that you can run the analysis based on the menus. Okay. And another program is called Statistica. Okay. So probably it's less likely you are going to use Statistica if you are in social sciences such as educational fields. This is because this program emphasizes on multivariate modeling and data mining. So if you have a lot of data and you really want to know what's going on about your data, Statistica has the function for you to conduct the data mining analysis. And of course, the standard procedures, like for example, statistical analysis such as regression, ANOVA, those are available in Statistica as well. Okay. There are also specialized programs. Okay. Those programs are for specialized analysis. All the earlier statistical packages, they are more general statistical packages. Okay. That allows you to do all types of statistical analysis, allows you to have data management functions. The specialized programs, the 4 I listed here are for structural equation modeling. Okay, so if you would like to conduct analysis using structural equation modeling, it's likely you are going to use a specialized program, because those specialized programs give you information that may not easily available from the other programs. M+, EQS, Lisreal, MX, and also there is Amos that I didn't list here. So all those specialized programs allow you to do particular analysis such as structural equation modeling, but they are not considered as general statistical packages because their data management functions are limited. Okay, you can still run like analysis such as regression, ANOVA using those specialized programs, but they are specifically designed for structural equation modeling. Okay. I have experiences using the first 3, MATLAB, R, SAS, and also several of those specialized programs. So my suggestion is, whenever you are going to choose a statistical program for you to use, I would like to choose one general statistical package such as SPSS or R or SAS or Stata. And for specialized needs, choose one from the list. Don't try to learn all of them because it may be time consuming. I would rather learn one statistical program well rather than learn 5 different programs but with limited knowledge about each of them.